Today, the 340i is getting a brake overhaul courtesy of keysmotorsports.com. We've got a set of slotted rotors, some new pads, some steel braided brake lines, and of course, a set of F80 M3 calipers. Now, Keys Motorsports recently did a super detailed 40-minute long installation guide for this exact project, so rather than just remaking their video verbatim, this is going to be more of a casual overview, sort of like a Cliff's Notes version, if you will. So for those of you who are actually planning to do this project at home, I'm going to link their video down in the description so you can see every nut and bolt being turned. And for those of you who are just here for the entertainment, sit back and enjoy the video. And we've got a special guest, my friend Randy, who knows way more about cars than I do. Is coming to help out and supervise today when it comes to brakes especially. You don't want to leave anything to chance, and I'll just feel a lot better having him help me. And also, I just get lonely in here sometimes. I think it'd be cool to have my friends on the channel more often, but yeah, let's do it. I met Randy in high school through skateboarding, and we recently reconnected through our love of cars. The 340i already has Brembo calipers in the front, but there's a small difference that we'll explain later.
Alright, so what I like to do is, whichever side I'm working on, I like to just turn the wheel, unlock the steering wheel, and just turn the wheel to whichever side. It's going to make it easier to access your caliper. Good?
Oh, is it turning?
Yep.
Okay. Disconnect the brake pad wear sensor in preparation for removing the caliper.
So basically we put a piece of wood on the brake pedal to introduce pressure to the system or move that piston down in the master cylinder, just basically to prevent any air from getting up into there, because that can kind of make a bigger headache than you want to deal with when you're just doing something kind of simple like this.
Use an 11mm line wrench to disconnect the brake line. A line wrench has extra sides to prevent the nut from stripping.
But now that we have a little bit of pressure in there, we're going to do this nice and slow as to not make a mess out of everything, because brake fluid is nasty stuff. So we're going to go ahead and let it just drip down there nice and easy into a drain pan. There we go, she's free. Alright, so we had just a little bit of trouble with this big honker that I brought over, getting to this top bolt. And what we ended up doing was getting a closed end wrench on here, and it was pretty tight. So when in doubt, carefully, you can use a hammer. It's basically like a manual impact wrench, literally, and you can knock stuff loose pretty easily that way, as long as you're mindful of what you're swinging around. And make sure you have a good seat where your wrench is sitting on your piece of hardware, because you don't want it to be cocked either way and, you know, risk damaging that piece of hardware. With these lock screws on here, I find that it does help to kind of get your tool in there and give it a few taps. And if you can think about those threads in there pulling that into your hub, when you smack it with a hammer like that, you're kind of breaking up in very small amounts the corrosion and stuff that's going to try to prohibit you from getting this guy out, especially because we have dissimilar metals here, so which does promote corrosion. So now that we have this tapped a few times, we're going to get the old handy dandy out again, just like that. Being newly introduced to this German car realm, I'm so impressed with the engineering of certain things and certain components that generally are problematic on domestic vehicles that I drive 90s cars from the USA typically, but one thing that I just don't understand is why don't they use studs? It's just way more, it makes way more sense to use studs in many facets. Okay, so when you're ready to replace your rotor, and you have everything coated up nicely for the next guy, they are left and right specific. So the easiest way that I've found to think of it is just picture yourself in the driver's seat. When you use your left turn signal, it's pointing to the left side of your car and you're turning left. When you use your right turn signal, it's pointing to the right side of your car. So that's the easiest way to think of it that I've found.
That's going to be hard for BMW guys because, you know, we don't use our turn signals.
That's a good point. I didn't think about that. Just think of who you're going to cut off.
Yeah, there you go.
So we have our one marked left, and pretty simply, you do want to line up your little lock with the corresponding hole in your hub. So I'll get this guy out. Again, as Brian said, the stud conversion is essential if you own one of these things. You really don't want to over torque this thing. There she goes.
Alright, so if you're wondering the purpose of changing the fronts, since on the 340s they come with the Brembos in the front anyway, the difference, if you look at the mounting points, it's stuck on my camera, on the F80 brakes it's actually offset a little bit more, so on the 340 you can only use up to a 340 millimeter rotor. It's kind of a coincidence with the size. And on the F80 brakes, you can use up to a 370 millimeter on the F30 without any modification. So that's the reason that we're upgrading these, and they're blue and they look really cool.
So now it is time to knock these pins out. And I've actually never seen this before, but I love this design. So you just kind of take a little punch here, take careful aim, give them a little boot, and then you can see they pretty much come right out. There we go, there's one. Just work it out of there. There we go. All right, so now we're gonna go ahead and replace this flexible hose with the stainless braided one. Should come out pretty easily. And then be mindful of any residual fluid that might be dripping out of there. Yep, there usually is. Okay. And this is a flared seat, so I like to kind of tighten them up, loosen them, tighten them again, just to make sure we have a nice seal on there. Because that flare actually will move a little bit to make a nice mating surface. And these do get pretty pressurized when you step on that pedal. Sweet. We'll get this guy installed. Get our stainless steel line routed. It's gonna go through this bracket. Pulls up into there, locks in with our clip, which we'll worry about once we get this guy mounted on here. Okay, we'll get our brand new bolts that we're not reusing.
Install the 18mm caliper bolts and torque them to 80 pound-feet.
There we go. All right, we'll get your special brake specific coating. Just smeared on the surface to inhibit corrosion as well as stop any potential noises from happening. Right in there, just like that. There we go.
With the new pads installed, hammer in the pins from the back side. They can only go in one way.
I'm driving it where it wants to go. So you can hear that difference in sound, and that's how you can tell that this thing is bottomed out and fully seated where it wants to be.
At this point, we can connect our new stainless brake line. The F30 has brake pad wear sensors on the front left and right rear calipers.
You pretty much just make sure it's facing the right way and push it right in. And you'll feel it kind of clip into there, and then you want to route your sensor wire accordingly. Okay, so now that we're ready to bleed brakes, you can do it without any special tools other than your line wrench if you have somebody to help you out. So train your girlfriend or boyfriend to help you. Teach them how to do this, and it makes life a lot easier. So Justin is going to be in the car, and he's gonna basically control the fluid pressure with his foot by hitting the brake pedal. So when he presses down, I'm gonna crack this bleeder, and it's going to let the fluid flow and the air flow out of here. Once I crack it open, he'll feel the pedal kind of dip down, and he'll keep holding it down until I tighten this back up. Because if you don't tighten this back up first, it can suck in air all the way through there, and then you're just gonna have to do your whole job over again in terms of bleeding the brakes. So he's gonna listen for me to say, pump them up, once this is shut, and then he'll pump them up, and then he'll hold it, and then I'll crack it open again, and we're gonna repeat that process until we don't see any bubbles coming out of here. And by doing a brake bleed like this, you're actually also introducing a lot of new fluid into your brake system, so you don't have to do really a complete like brake flush, so to say, because you're essentially doing that by bleeding them somewhat excessively. So that's what we're aiming for, and then by the time we're done, we're gonna have all new fluid throughout the system.
To bleed the brakes, we used a clear hose to visually see the air bubbles coming out of the system and to guide the harmful fluid away from the finish on the calipers.
Okay, go ahead and pump it up. Hold it.
After bleeding both front calipers, we used brake cleaner to ensure that no fluid residue was left on our new parts.
Okay, pump it. Hold it.
We repeated the process several times on each side of the car, topping off the reservoir with new fluid each time. With the fronts complete, I was ready to get my hands dirty on the rears. It was cool to learn firsthand from someone who's probably done this job 100 times.
Yeah.
Oh no, sorry.
It's a different size.
Yeah.
Okay, loosen it and then tighten it.
Yeah, give it some. You'll feel it keep going a little bit if you give her the beans. There you go. Yep. Then you can kind of get it sort of lined up, because you can see through that hole.
Yeah.
Pump. Hold.
So it's been a couple days since the install, and first of all, huge thank you to my friend Randy for not only helping me out with this project, but also agreeing to be on camera. We had a really good time hanging out. And of course, thank you to Keys Motorsports for supplying the parts. Now, my initial impression, it's a massive improvement in performance from what I can tell so far. Now, there's kind of a lot going on with that. We've got the larger 370mm rotors up front. Also, we have 2 piston calipers in the rear now. We've got a more performance-oriented brake pad, new lines, new fluids. So it's hard to say which of those things really contributed to the better performance. Kind of like a combination of those, especially considering that I was just on the stock stuff, which to my knowledge was all original with 50,000 miles on it. But so far I'm very impressed. And one of the things that I love about the F30 that I always talk about is just the amount of aftermarket support there is, not only from aftermarket companies, but the amount of F80 M3 parts that are direct bolt-on on this car is really cool too. Do you have any horror stories working on brakes?
Yeah, it wasn't so much to my horror, but my poor buddy Jeff. So he had this really clean 97 Grand Am that he bought, or no, he got, I don't know if he inherited it or if he bought it or it was given to him or what, but it was from his grandmother. It was a really clean car, pretty low mileage, and he came over to do his brakes with me. So we did, I think it was just pads and rotors, and lo and behold, he jumps in the driver's seat for the test drive. And like my house has a fence that you drive through and then you go up to the garage. So as we get in, I'm like about to tell him to pump the brakes, okay? And like before I can even get it out or even get my seatbelt on, he has it in reverse. And I'm like, he hits the brakes, and I go, pump the brakes, and he's pumping the brakes, and he's panicking, and he's like, it's not stopping. And mind you, this is all happening within a few seconds. And next thing you know, he is not exactly aiming the right way, and he starts clipping my fence post with like the driver's side rear quarter panel / bumper of his car. And I'm like, hit your brakes, and we're both panicking because there are things that you can do to stop this from happening or getting as bad as it did, like putting it into neutral or just shutting the key off. So keep that in mind if you're ever in that situation. Don't panic. So anyhow, me and Jeff are both panicking. He's hitting his brakes, nothing's happening. The car gets dragged at idle speed, mind you. The car gets dragged from the left rear all the way up, both doors, smacks his mirror clean off, and his brakes finally start working when we're all the way at the front fender. And I, for some reason, couldn't stop laughing, and it was terrible because I felt horrible. But I couldn't stop laughing at how chaotic it all was. And I knew I shouldn't have been laughing, but it was like an overwhelming sense. And I'm just like, Jeff, I'm so sorry. And we got out, and his car was just destroyed on the driver's side. It was really bad. So we ended up spending the rest of the night gluing parts back on and trying to source parts to replace it, and never ended up finding the parts for it because just a few months later, actually, he called me over to his house, and he said that his car wouldn't start, but he had just driven it the previous day. So I'm like, all right, well, let's check it out. So I try to crank it over, and it sounds bad. Like when you kind of have been around cars for a little while, you know when you hear a sound that's just not a good sound, and you know it's not a good sound. So I'm like, let me pull your spark plugs out real quick. It was a 2.4 liter. So I pull the valve cover thing off that has the spark plug coil plugs on there, and I pull one of his plugs out, and it's smashed. When you have a smashed spark plug, something is really wrong. So I took my phone camera and I looked down there with the flashlight, and I could see a valve sitting on top of the piston and a very distinctive crack right across his piston. And I had to tell him that it was time to put her down, you know. So I think it's still sitting in his driveway, actually, but she was a goner, you know. It was timing chain, or maybe a timing belt, actually. And I said, well, when's the last time you changed the oil? And I pulled the dipstick, and there was no oil in it.
Ooh.
Well, no oil on the dipstick, so you know it was at least a quart, maybe 2 quarts low, at least. So when that happens, bad things happen. So keep up on your oil changes. Long story short, and pump your brakes before you put it in reverse or drive.